So welcome all. Thank you so much for joining. This is, let's see, this is, what is this? Our 12th session, and we're looking at chapter 12. As usual, I will share with you the link to the place where we take notes. Let me switch over here. This is the document in my background. So that is the document for taking notes. You're welcome to scribble in there. You have full edit access. So this is, in a good way, this is kind of the end here. This is chapter 12, the final project, which, as I was reading through it today, it made me think like, oh, this is kind of meant for learning, right? Oh, there is a final project. It's interesting. Took me back to seeing this as a kind of a taught curriculum, which I didn't really look at it before. But anyway, so I think let's start reading. On other notes, we have 3 pull requests open for chapters 5, 6, 7. That maybe it's just time to merge those in. And then I also need to create pull requests for chapters 8, 9, and 10, I believe. If anyone wants to help with those, you're totally welcome. Any other questions, thoughts before we hop in and start reading this one? Ariel already shared the link to the page in the chat. Cool. Anyone wants to start? I mean, when you see the title "Final Project," before we actually start reading, did you have anyone have like I don't know? I told you what my reflection was when I saw final chapter, final project, final chapter. Sounds serious. Did you have any specific expectations of what you expect from this page?
I like the fact that final comes at the end, but also makes me think of school and like, okay, like a sort of sense of graduation, even if it's graduating from the guide itself. Not necessarily a bad thing.
Please go ahead.
I wonder also similarly, like about the word final. I feel like this like final project sort of makes me think of school or like Coursera courses where when you finish it, you are accredited in some way. And I suppose after doing some of these steps, it's not really the end, it's the beginning of your contribution journey. So I guess I kind of almost want to label it something like start contributing or like get involved, or the first project. Paper's like
Or your first project.
Well, both things are good, right? A sense that, wow, I've worked now through this whole guide here and I've got something done. But also the sense of then applying all of that into something new and starting off on a longer journey. Yeah, let's see how we can squeeze that in. But how about we start reading, and then see what we think afterwards. Any takers for the first part?
I can go.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you can go first.
You can go.
Okay, I'll go. So, step 1, or yeah, okay, yeah. So, step 1, choosing a project. First, you need to find a project to contribute to. Here's how to go about it. 1, reflect on your interests. What kind of software do you care about? It could be anything from a text editor to a game engine. Second, assess your skills. What type of design work do you feel most confident doing? UI design, icon creation, user research. Look for opportunities, visit GitHub, GitLab, or other open source platforms. Look for projects that interest you and seem to need design help. Check the project's openness to contribution. Look for a contributing.md file or similar documentation about how to get involved. Start small. For your first major contribution, it's often best to choose a medium sized project rather than a huge one like Linux or Firefox. Remember, it's okay to take your time with this step. Finding the right project is crucial for the good for a good experience. Yeah, so here maybe it's a good para. So maybe we can give them some links where they can find some projects maybe. And yeah, it's actually good where like we have told them where to look for in GitHub. Like I like the point that you have to look for contributing.md file, which is helpful. Um, yeah, maybe we can give some more examples to what to look for exactly.
Oh, okay. I'm wondering, how do you find projects? Uh, like for beginner like me, I cannot search any projects, any sub specific projects for um, for me, for my interest. So I'm wondering, how do you find projects for expert designers who interested in open source projects?
I have a couple of suggestions for this section. It's funny because my first thought was not to suggest the jobs page on open source design, which has a lot of projects that want design contribution. But my first thought was recommending that people look towards projects like Outreachy or Google Summer of Code because they are collections of projects that have intentionally thought about contributions in some way, like so code contributions typically, or documentation, and a few design ones here and there. And more than anything, searching through those places for projects, you sort of know that they have thought about contributions generally. There's like a confidence that at the very least they'll have some of the structures that are needed. But then of course there's also open source design.net/jobs, which is open projects that need design contributions. But those are the sort of things that I would typically suggest to people when they sort of have asked me in the past, like, how do I find a project if I don't already know of a project?
That's a good point. Looking for projects that have made some type of effort and signaled in some way that they want contributions and kind of have created a path for that. Yeah, I think this is, looking at this page here, my biggest thing was for every bullet point here, we have a whole page in the guide, or at least some chapters in earlier pages for it. So as it also says in the first sentence, now that we've covered all the aspects, now it's time to put your skills into practice. So I think finding projects, reading the documentation. We can link back to all these other chapters and maybe just pull out one or two of the main bits, and we don't necessarily have to repeat them here. Something else that was in the call last week, which was interesting. Mo asked, there was a topic of mentors, and pretty much everyone said, yes, I would love to have a mentor. That is the thing that will likely help me get started. And Mo made a point there about being proactive and reaching out to people in person, not just looking at stuff that's written on forums or elsewhere. But yeah, that seems like let's take a look here. Design guide, table of contents, finding the right project, chapter 3. Should probably link to this one.
Out of curiosity, when you were talking about mentoring, did any specific kind of platforms kind of come up as suggestions?
No, just one-on-one conversations with people. And I know there is some website, some platform where people can make, I forgot what it's called, but I feel like it's gotten popular, where people can make themselves available as mentors and whatnot. But I don't know, it looked suspicious to me. I quickly looked at, I know it was ADP list. Yeah, that's what it is.
I've been on ADP for maybe like 3 or 4 years, and it's only just started monetizing like mentoring. So I think now it's less wholesome than it used to be. But it is like design focused mentoring, but not open source focused.
And what's your experience with this? There we go.
My experience, I've had some really lovely conversations. I've had actually a good number of people reached out when they're working on like open source projects or like open data projects to ask for advice on how to do design within open projects, which is nice. But I've also had like probably a lot more people looking at like wanting reviews of their portfolio or working in NGOs or applying for PhDs in design as well. So essentially just the things that I list in my profile. But the structure of it, really good. Like the infrastructure is pretty decent. But like I certainly wouldn't think of it re-open source. When I think of open source and mentoring, the first project that comes to mind is Outreachy, because part of the Outreachy's infrastructure for accepting, because they fund a intern to work on the open source project, part of their process is the open source organization has to have had like made a commitment to mentoring, some mentorship. Yeah. And I think you even have to attend, back when I did it, Outreachy mentoring, you have to attend like mentoring training as well.
Makes sense. More formal structure there. Yeah, all of these paths are totally valid. Really just kind of depends on what you want to do, and because open source is just so diverse, they can all be good paths. Okay, coming back to this page. Any other thoughts on this one? Like I said, I feel like this should all be links to other chapters and sections. Any other thoughts on this one, or should we continue reading?
I have a suggestion, not for the specific paragraph, but like for the name of the last chapter. Like it's final project, so it feels like it's your last project. Like rather than that, maybe as paper suggested, the first project or something like beginning of a journey kind of a thing. That your journey starts here or something like that. Like more like it's a start, not the end.
Venturing into the world.
Yeah.
Like how with Western universities, they call the graduation ceremony commencement, which is the same idea. It's like the end, but no, it's actually the beginning. Might
Yeah.
be interesting.
You know, I think if someone really wants to give a certificate or whatever and organize an actual teaching and coding and whatever, they can totally do that. I think just for raw online material, I think we'll stay away from anything like graduating or so. But maybe if someone wants to do that later, have like nice trophies and stuff, 3D printed, that'd be kind of cool too. Now 3D print your own trophy. Here's the model. Okay, should we continue reading? Is that good? I think this will also sound very familiar. Anyone wants to read the next one? Please go ahead.
Okay. So step 2, understanding the project. Once you've chosen a project, dive in and learn about it. 1, install and use the software. Get familiar with it from a user perspective. 2, read the documentation, understand the project's goals, target users, and current state. 3, look at past contributions. See what kind of design works has been done before. 4, join the community. Introduce yourself on the project chat, forum, or mailing list. 5, identify pain points. As you use the software, note any usability issues or areas for improvement. Take notes during this process. Your observations will be valuable when you start designing.
Go for it.
One, I don't know whether this is the best way to word it, but maybe a little note in the last sentence. Some projects might not have one or more of these, like specifically looking at understanding the project's goals, target users, and current state, like that might be non-existent. So if somebody was really following this as like a really strict guide, or then assumes that that's something the project needs to have before they can get involved, then just like, yeah, a little note to say these might not.
Maybe it should be the other way around. Almost only very few projects will actually have these. Assume they don't. That seems to be more like the scenario. I think that's also it doesn't have to be software. That this could be much bigger and different. Yeah, you know, one of the great things is as a designer, you can actually come in and create all that stuff. You can be the person who makes all that happen, and usually people are pretty happy when you do. But you kind of have to put the foot forward and do that.
On that note, I would almost like move point 2 to point 1. Like, I would start with reading the documentation rather than trying to use the software, because I don't know if other designers would be the same as me. If I started by installing and using, I would start identifying pain points automatically, which kind of might undermine the focus of the project. So I would start with documentation.
So here's a counterpoint to that. You only ever have one first impression. And if you start as a user, you can have that untainted from the documents or anything else first impression that you will never ever have again. Once you read the manual, then you're screwed. You've eaten from the tree and you can never go back.
but you can also do user testing with new users to achieve the same result.
But is it as personal? I don't know.
No.
Either way, whatever works.
Yeah, I suppose at that point is when I would then like recruit other designers that haven't seen. So I think this kind of gets into complicated, like more advanced topics, like what it means to be the design lead of like a open source project versus like a contributor, an individual contributor. And like I would see the responsibility of a design lead to be knowing the documentation inside out, and a contributor does not. But the design lead can help guide them with anyway. So nuances.
You got to use it at some point. You cannot
You
not
gotta,
use
yeah.
it. You have to be familiar with it. Yeah. Anything else on this point, or should we move on to the next one? By the way, I like how this page is bullet points and numbered lists. It feels very, do these things in this order. It feels practical. I didn't like it so much with some of the other content pages, but I feel like here it's a good thing. So interesting. I'm such a fan of when I come across something, just sitting on the sofa away from my computer, just lounging somewhere, turning off my designer brain and just using something and pretending I know nothing about the world. Just a pure innocent experience. But maybe that's just me. Okay. Who would like to read the next one?
I'm happy to read the next one.
Thank you.
Step 3, proposing your contribution. Now that you understand the project, it's time to propose your design contribution. 1, choose your focus. Based on your skills and the project's needs, decide what you want to work on. It could be a redesign of a specific feature, a new set of icons, a usability study, or something else. Number 2, draft a proposal. Write up your idea, including the problem you're addressing, your proposed solution, how it aligns with the project's goals, a rough timeline for the work. 3, get feedback. Share your proposal with the community, be open to suggestions, and be prepared to revise your plans. 4, finalize your plan. Once you have community buy-in, refine your proposal into a concrete plan of action. Remember, communication is key in open source. Keep the community updated as you work.
How does that sound?
It's pretty good.
Is that how you work in your day? Is that how you actually work in your day today? Because I
It's
was
pretty
just
good.
thinking, like, this is maybe more structured than how I work.
I have done this.
Yeah.
I've done this in open source projects that have very multiple forks, so multiple instances of the same code and differing stakeholder needs. I've certainly done this process for smaller projects. I think a reduced version of this process, but I think this is a good process. I would advise that this process is your default process, and then you what's the word? Prune, cut out bits that don't feel appropriate to smaller projects. But this is also unusual, right? Like from an open source perspective, like what coder is writing up a plan before they submit a PR change? Sorry, I laugh. I shouldn't laugh, but I haven't seen that very often from the code side of things. So it's interesting to me that this is the way that design is understood and valued in the space. But yeah, it's a good It also made me think of some designers which want that instant. Some designers I've spoken to that want to make contributions to open source assume that it will be like quicker. And so reading this might discourage people that want like the same kind of experience that they get when they create a portfolio project, which, you know, you don't. I mean, obviously open source is different than a portfolio project. A portfolio project, you don't have to, you can fabricate your client and it's fake client. But yeah, I wonder what this will sound like to first time like contributors. Actually, does anybody, yeah, how does it make other people feel? Does it like encourage you, or does it like make you think, oh god, that's so much work?
To me, it feels straightforward enough, relatively accessible, short and sweet, not overly bloated, but each their own.
I think some of this goes back to doing a proposal first. Maybe people don't like your proposal, and maybe for good reasons. Maybe like it should change a little bit because you're new to the project, or maybe they like it, and that's awesome too. But the good thing doing it that way is before you invest a lot of time, you first figure out, you kind of get support, and then if people are happy with it, they will support you more. They're like, okay, cool, I will code this for you, or I will do a translation, or whatever. Another designer might hop in. So the doing this in a methodical way can be very helpful or destructive. Really depends on the project culture. But I've never seen it be destructive, to be honest. People are always nice. Yeah, examples for all of these, everything, anywhere in the guide, we need examples pretty much. Any other thoughts on this one, or should we go to doing the design work? Any takers?
I'll take a spin. Doing the design work. This is where you put all your skills into practice. Research, if needed. Do user research to inform your design decisions. 2, sketch and ideate. Come up with multiple possible solutions to the problem. 3, create mock-ups or prototypes. Use the tools you're comfortable with to visualize your ideas. 4, apply project standards. Make sure your work fits with any existing style or design patterns. 5, document your process. Keep notes on your decisions and rationale. 6, seek feedback early and often. Share works in progress with the community and iterate based on feedback. Remember to use version control like Git as you work, even for design files. This helps you track changes and collaborate more easily. To me, this falls in a similar category of like aspirational best practice for a process. I don't think it would stress anyone out, but it's nice to just kind of check boxes of like what's considered by a broad section of the design community good practices. So I dig it. I note some. Actually, this might just be my browser width. Oh yeah, okay. I saw some strange text wrapping, but all good, of course, when I extend the browser.
Yeah, examples will bring this to life.
Yep.
That's really the key thing. So that's probably fine.
I know I haven't been part of all the calls, but I do remember in the past discussions of like bolded subtitles or like, yeah, and just the standards within the guide of like, should sketch and ideate be bolded, kind of make it more scannable like a checklist, but the numbers are there too. So whatever way is consistent with the rest of the guide. But sometimes I like the bold subheadings. Those aren't really headers because they're kind of like lead-ins from the bullets, but I like the section.
And they're such short bullets too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, minor details. We can tweak those. Any other thoughts on this one? Straightforward? Any questions? Community Open Food Network.
Sorry, that's a project for the example of like when I did some stuff at the Open Food Network. It might be gated on Discord as well. You might need to. I can download a PDF of the page though.
Yep, I see it. Cool. Example. Yep, cool. Yeah, I also have to dig up a bunch of examples. There's a haha in that comment. Let's see. Dream design process.
I wrote loads of documentation for a design process for OFN that's very depends on how useful it is.
Oh yeah, you had the pebble stone boulder. You've mentioned that before. I'm so jealous of this process. Look at that. It's great.
We followed it like for 6 months and then I left and then I don't think they follow it anymore.
Right, that's an interesting question. How do you make this consistent? Is it a cultural thing? Is it something to do with habits? Do you need tools to enforce this, or that's a totally different thing here. With like, developers, they have this stuff. They have like linting tools and all this automated stuff for. I mean, I guess that they just have much more automated ways of enforcing many different things. Not necessarily how the communication happens, but many aspects of it are encoded, enshrined in tools. Maybe we can get there someday.
I think I also have an example for doing the design work as well. It's not perfectly following this process, but when I did a stream about some work at one point, I think it showed a lot of these bits of the process, so that might be useful.
Speaking of improving design tools, maybe I spoke with the community manager of PenPod this morning, and I think after some current stuff that they're working on, they're going to start looking more into collaboration stuff. And maybe we can have conversations with them about what we expect from open source design tools. And we can talk about merging or conversations, approvals, or other type of stuff. That was Medit. He's only been there for a month now. So good. They're happy and excited to hear these things if you have ideas. This would be a cool brainstorming session about what do we want this to be like, what would be good, and what should be baked into tools. Maybe not for this very call. Should we anything more about doing the design work, or should we go to step 5? Yeah, I can read the next one, since I haven't read yet. All right, step 5, presenting your work. Once your design work is complete, it is time to present it to the project. Prepare your files. Make sure all your design files are well organized and in appropriate formats. Write up your contribution. Explain your design decisions, how you address the original problem, and any technical considerations for implementation. Create a pull request or equivalent. Follow the project's process for submitting contributions. Be responsive, answer questions, and be open to making revisions based on community feedback. Help with implementation. If possible, assist the developers in implementing your designs. Your presentation should be clear, professional, and show how your work benefits the project. Yeah, I guess a little bit feedback is like, what does it mean to present to the project? I think present it to the community, present it to the lead developers. Are you presenting to the people who opened that particular issue that you're working on? And what is meant by professional? Are you going to put on a suit and have like a nice boardroom meeting? Um, I mean, it should be well put together, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean kind of the LinkedIn professional. You can just have totally casual, normal conversations with people about it, and it could happen on Telegram or somewhere else, you know? So I feel like I'm not sure if presenting your work has to be feel so formal, right? And organizing your files well is not, that can also happen later. Like the next step is documentation, right? Because you might still get feedback, it might still change. Maybe that happens a little bit afterwards. Yeah, so I guess just making a little, not sound so formal, more communal or whatever. That would be my feedback on this one. What stream is this, Ariel?
This stream is for, and let me get the repository for the project. I actually got permission from the project team as well to be like, can I publicly talk about this? But it's a project called Danger Zone.
Ooh.
Awful project name, but
I don't know, sounds exciting.
I mean, one of the pieces of work we did for them was trying to figure out whether they wanted to call something that is about protecting files and cleaning files Danger Zone. Anyway, branding. Yeah. But I will find the repository, but it's an open source, takes a text file and an OCR scans it. Mm-hmm. So it cleans the file of malware. It's good. It's a cool project. They're a nice team as well if you want to contribute design. Freedom of the Press Foundation made it.
Oh, I think I feel like I'm familiar with them. There was a team at the Oslo Freedom Forum this year that also helped clean people's devices and looked for malware and stuff. I wonder if that was them. Cool. Everyone's pretty quiet. Any other thoughts on this one, or should we just kind of keep reading? Everyone happy with everything here?
I'm curious about how other people have presented their work. Like if folks have one of the things that I got really familiar with and doing because of like time zones as well with open source projects is like doing screen recordings of my like design. But I think we talked about that when we were talking in a previous chapter. Short calls.
Yes. I'm just taking something up here. I wonder if this still works here. Here's an example of one of my... I think at the time this Reddit had 150,000 members. It's 300,000 now. But this was how I asked for feedback on certain designs.
seeing this Reddit post reminds me of like how often like designers in the open source design community were like looking on places like Stack Overflow and like Reddit around they look for they're looking for design conversations in those places as well. I wonder if that's something that's worth talking about. I don't know. Maybe not.
You mean like, so there's a difference between getting not professional but critique from an experienced designer versus just presenting something in general to the community and see if they generally like this change, like this is a good thing that should be added or not. Are you thinking about more about the, I don't want to use the term professional, but professional feedback?
I think I was more making a general comment that because chatting and like because on like Stack Overflow there's like this conversational element that is like, is my code correct? No, you can do it this way, you can fix it this way. That sort of interaction is similar to like how designers want like feedback interactions.
Mhm.
And issues in GitHub do less of that kind of conversational interaction support. And so, yeah, I wonder if that's like when presenting or getting in the feedback section, it's about kind of reminding that there are like other methods. There are other, what am I trying to say, like platforms that are more conversation feedback, like is part of their like purpose,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Certain social media platforms are not part for deep conversation these days. That's for sure, and other ones are better for it. Cool. So we have about 15 minutes. Anyone wants to read step 6? Paper Psych, how about it? Kayamari, please go ahead. You raised your hand if you have a question or you'd like to read. Both are good.
To read step 6.
Thank you.
Reflection and documentation. After your contribution is accepted, or even if it isn't, take time to reflect. Write a case study. Document the entire process from start to finish. This is great for your portfolio and helpful for other designers. 2. Identify lessons learned. What went well? What would you do differently next time? 3. Share your experience. Consider writing a blog post or giving a talk about what you learned. 4. Plan your next steps. Will you continue contributing to this project or move on to a new one? This reflection process is crucial for your growth as an open source designer.
What do you think of this paragraph?
I think it's okay, but I think when you're doing the design work, you can, while you're working on it for each process, you take notes so that when you go to the documentation part, you'll be able to have the exact thoughts that you had while designing and be able to write it and make a more coherent reflection. But regarding the steps, I think that's a decent, and they're spot on with what I've worked on before when I was documenting my previous design works.
Very good point. Yeah, it's like you continuously create these artifacts, right? And then at the end you don't try to think back. How did I feel 2 months ago? But you already have that. You can just kind of summarize it and then think about that whole experience. Yeah, very true. Very true. It's this whole part about building in progress and capturing things as you go. I don't I don't know. I do this quite a lot all the time, actually. Do other people here do this?
The reflection and documentation.
Yeah, just continuously writing down what you're doing, what your next things are, if you're happy with something, not happy, just thinking about this stuff. Like observing yourself all the time and kind of thinking about, I guess, this, how are things? Is this good, bad? Looking back, reviewing.
I mean, formally in Superbloom, we are supposed to have project retros, like from purely the design side. So that's kind of when we do like documentation reflection. But I don't have that practice of like noticing whether something is good, or at least I haven't for a while. That usually it's like we actually. I know we're recording, but I'll say more generally, some organizations have a really difficult time defining what equals good in open source, because sometimes open source doesn't have a clear understanding of what goals they want to achieve for what users. And I think then it becomes difficult to reflect when that isn't agreed and clear. Sorry for a long answer, but yeah, that's a struggle that we have.
I feel like a lot of my own reflections happen at the, like looking back on to-do lists, more kind of granular, and then seeing from like to-do list from the week ago. So I rarely kind of like look back over the months of the to-do list, but all the things I crossed off, trying to be more efficient next week, that kind of thing. More informal.
Yeah, I found it super helpful when, like with these Reddit presentations, to try slightly different formats and ways of writing and then seeing how people respond and whether and how successful the feedback was. So not successful feedback was when people started talking about completely different things, right? It just got derailed. It was not helpful. Yeah, so I would look at what people say and respond to what they said, but I would also always try to take a step back and like compared to the last presentation, like this was this better, was this worse, maybe why, and all of that. Cool. We have about 9 minutes left. We have 3 more things. How about we go through them pretty quickly? I guess. I don't. Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah, I'll take up the next one.
Cool.
I'll take both project timeline and evaluation criteria. So, project timeline. Here's a suggested timeline for this project. Weeks 1 and 2, choose a project and understand it. Week 3, propose your contribution. Week 4 to 6, do the design work. Week 7, present your work and handle feedback. And week 8, reflection and documentation. Adjust this timeline as needed based on the scope of your chosen project and your other commitments. This is pretty straightforward. I don't think it needs much addition, but yeah, propose your getting feedback should be just mentioned earlier again, that keep getting feedback while you're doing uh, the design work, etc.
Yeah, I mean it's also completely made up, right? There's no
Yeah,
idea of, like, are you just designing a little icon or creating like a small graphic?
yeah,
How long, or are you creating a whole style guide, or are you designing a
yeah,
huge thing? You know, it's just kind of made up. Maybe it should say, if you are doing something like this,
yes,
and
yes.
then maybe usually feedback takes longer because if your project is spread all over the world, make sure to give plenty of time and so forth.
I mean, yes, the opening line should say something like that the project timelines is usually, as it mentioned in the last line, that it needs to be adjusted based on the scope. But at the starting also, like you need to be flexible and stuff, and maybe give 3 examples or something, that there are flexible timelines. It could look like this or this or this, but I wouldn't want to like uh, extend the section, but something like a table, I guess,
Mhm.
to help them compare. Any other points, anyone? Otherwise, the next one.
Let's go.
Okay.
Sorry, I have one point. We recently got introduced to the RITE framework, or like that's existed for a while. Is that familiar to folks? It's like a iterative framework, and that might be like something to reference for how timings maybe for things.
Okay, something to look into, I guess. Okay, that sounds serious here. Cool. I'll put that one in notes. And that was part of a project.
It was a request to respond to how design would fit into, or how design would use that process, or like talk around that process for contributions.
Okay. Cool. All right, 5 minutes. Let's keep reading.
Yeah. Next one. Evaluation criteria. Your project will be evaluated based on number one, choice of project. Is it appropriate for your skills and the course goals? Second, understanding of the project. Did you grasp the project's needs and context? Third, quality of your design work. Does it really solve a problem effectively? Number four, community interaction. How well did you communicate and handle feedback? Number five, documentation. How well did you explain your process and decisions? Six, reflection. How thoughtfully did you analyze your own work and learnings? Remember, in open source, the process is often as important as the final product. Show your work, communicate clearly, and be a good community member. Evaluation criteria, like who? Is it me evaluating myself?